Deputy Sheriff Jack Carter never imagined that a routine patrol would turn into the most emotional night of his career. Out of the shadows came a tiny puppy, trembling, crying, refusing to let him go. At first, he thought it was lost, but when the pup began pulling him urgently toward the woods of rural Oregon, Jack sensed something was terribly wrong. What he discovered hidden in the darkness left him breathless. A heartbreaking fight for survival, a mother's silent plea, and a loyalty so pure it would bring him to his knees. This was no ordinary call. It was a ghost of his past, offering a chance at redemption. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the quiet county road. Deputy Carter adjusted his patrol cap as he stepped off the gravel shoulder at the end of his evening route. It had been an uneventful shift. No calls, no emergencies, just the kind of calm every officer secretly hoped for but rarely got. He exhaled, ready to head back to the station and put his feet up after hours of driving the back roads in heavy boots. But just as he turned the corner toward his parked patrol car, something stirred in the distance. At first, it was nothing more than a faint scuffling sound. Jack slowed, tilting his head, his senses sharpened from years on the job. From the edge of the dusty road, a tiny figure appeared, small, fragile, its little paws kicking up specks of dirt as it stumbled forward. A puppy, not more than a few weeks old, with floppy ears too big for its head and eyes that glistened like pools of midnight. Jack froze, blinking in surprise. Puppies weren't a common sight out here, especially not wandering alone. He crouched slightly, his hand instinctively brushing against the radio clipped to his chest. "Hey, little guy," he murmured, his voice soft, cautious. To his astonishment, the puppy didn't run. Instead, it waddled straight toward him, its tiny legs moving with clumsy determination. It stopped just inches away, tilted its head up, and let out the faintest whimper. Something about that sound made Jack's chest tighten. He extended a hand, but before he could touch it, the puppy spun around and trotted a few steps away, then stopped, looking back as if expecting him to follow. Jack chuckled under his breath. "What are you trying to do? Huh? Lead me somewhere?" He straightened, half expecting the pup to lose interest and run off. But it didn't. Instead, it barked, a sharp, tiny yelp that echoed louder than it should have in the empty road. And then trotted forward again. Glancing back with urgency, a knot of unease began to creep into his bones. This wasn't the random wandering of a stray. This puppy wanted something, needed something, and for reasons he couldn't quite explain. It felt eerily purposeful. Jack followed the pup a few cautious steps, expecting it to dart away. But the little creature didn't flee. Instead, it stopped abruptly, turned its head, and locked its eyes on him. Its gaze was sharp, unblinking, far too focused for such a young pup. Then, with a sudden bark, it sprinted ahead again, pausing only when Jack hesitated. It was as though the tiny animal refused to continue unless he came along. He frowned, hands resting on his duty belt. Something about the behavior unsettled him. Stray dogs usually begged, circled for food, or ran in panic, but this one didn't want scraps or comfort. It wanted direction. It wasn't wandering, it was leading. Jack's instincts told him to brush it off, to return to his car, and let animal control handle the situation. Yet, something deep inside whispered otherwise. The pup barked again, a sharp, insistent cry that cut through the still evening air. Then it trotted forward, tail stiff, ears perked like antennae, stopping every few feet to look back at him. Each time Jack lingered, the pup whimpered, pacing in tiny, urgent circles as though pleading with him to hurry. Jack rubbed the back of his neck, unease settling deeper in his chest. He'd seen odd things in his career, but never anything quite like this. "All right, buddy," he muttered under his breath, his voice a mix of curiosity and caution. "You've got my attention, show me where you want to go." The pup yipped as if in response, then darted ahead once more, kicking up small clouds of dust on the fading road. This time, Jack followed more deliberately, his boots crunching against the gravel. A gnawing feeling refused to leave his gut. Something wasn't right. The pup wasn't asking for food. It was asking for help. The puppy's paws patted against the dirt road as it darted ahead. Glancing back to make sure Jack followed, each glance carried an urgency as though time itself was slipping away. Jack adjusted the flashlight at his side. Sighing, he knew he should radio this in, but his gut told him to trust the animal. The road narrowed until it curved toward the edge of a dense wooded area, the kind that defined the Oregon landscape. Jack hesitated. The woods stretched dark and endless, their shadows thickening with every passing second of twilight. He'd patrolled this area before. Locals avoided it after sunset. Too many stories of coyotes. Too many reports of accidents on the unlit trails. But the puppy didn't care. It barked sharply, its tiny body trembling with insistence. then darted between the first cluster of Douglas firs. The officer cursed under his breath and stepped forward. Branches brushed against his uniform as he pushed through. The crunch of dry leaves echoed beneath his boots, mixing with the sound of the puppy's hurried steps. Jack kept his flashlight low, its beam slicing through the underbrush. The air grew colder, the stillness heavier. The little dog would run ahead a few feet, stop, bark, and wait until he caught up before pressing forward again. It was guiding him with an intelligence that was both astounding and unsettling. Minutes passed. Each step carried him deeper into the thick shadows. Doubt pricked at his thoughts. What am I doing out here chasing after a stray? Yet, every time he considered turning back, the puppy's sharp cry pulled him onward. Jack's jaw tightened. He'd learned to trust his instincts. And tonight they were screaming that this was no ordinary call for attention. The deeper Jack ventured, the quieter the forest became. The soft crunch of his boots and the rapid patter of the puppy's paws were the only sounds breaking the eerie stillness. His flashlight beam cut across tangled branches and damp earth. Then, suddenly, he froze. From somewhere up ahead, faint and fragile, came a sound that wasn't the puppy's bark. At first, he thought he'd imagined it. An echo, a trick of the woods. But then it came again. A soft, broken whimper, different, deeper. It wasn't the voice of a young pup, but something older, weaker, heavier with pain. Jack's pulse quickened. He lifted his flashlight higher, his jaw tightening as he scanned the shadows. The puppy barked once sharply and sprinted forward toward the sound. Wait, Jack called out, quickening his steps. The whimper returned, and this time it was unmistakable. Someone or something was suffering in the dark. The beam of light quivered as Jack's hand shook, adrenaline surging through him. This was no longer just a curious detour. His instincts screamed that the little pup wasn't leading him on a game. It was leading him to a truth. He pressed onward, branches snapping underfoot, his heart pounding. The sound grew louder, more desperate. The puppy stopped just ahead, tail stiff, and barked with renewed urgency as if begging Jack to hurry. Jack narrowed his eyes, sweeping the flashlight across a cluster of fallen branches. For a split second, the forest floor seemed still. But then, in the corner of the light's reach, something shifted. A shape, barely visible, trembled weakly in the shadows. His breath caught in his throat. It wasn't just another animal. It was something bigger, fragile and broken. The puppy whimpered again, circling the spot, pawing desperately at the ground. Jack's chest tightened, dread and compassion colliding in his heart. He gripped the flashlight tighter, knowing he was about to uncover something that would change this night forever. Jack's flashlight beam steadied on the trembling shape. Slowly, he pushed forward. The puppy barked once, high-pitched and sharp, then whined as it pawed frantically at the tangled branches. With one quick motion, Jack knelt down, his breath caught instantly. Beneath a fallen cluster of branches lay the emaciated frame of a Belgian Malinois. Her fur was matted, her body frighteningly thin, the sharp, intelligent face of a breed he knew well from his time with the K9 unit. She struggled weakly, every shallow breath rattling through her ribs. The sight pierced Jack's heart. He dropped to one knee, leaning closer as the mother dog lifted her head slightly, her eyes glassy but aware. In that fleeting moment, there was no mistaking it. The puppy belonged to her. She gave a faint, desperate whimper, as if begging him to understand. The pup rushed to her side, pressing its tiny body against her muzzle, licking her face furiously. Jack's chest tightened until he could barely breathe. This wasn't just a stray. This was a desperate child pleading for someone to save its mother. His throat burned as he reached forward, gently brushing away the smaller branches trapping her. She flinched, but her eyes never left his. They weren't the eyes of a wild animal. They were the eyes of a mother who had fought too long, too hard, and was now at the edge of surrender. Jack bit down hard, emotion flooding his chest. He could almost hear her silent words. Please, don't let my baby be alone. He swallowed, his voice low and steady. It's okay, girl, you held on long enough. I've got you now. The puppy whimpered louder, circling Jack before burying itself against the mother's weak frame. Daniel fought back tears, reaching down to stroke the mother's head gently. She let out a small sigh, as though relieved that someone had finally come. He exhaled sharply. She was malnourished, dehydrated, and possibly injured, but despite her pain, she had survived long enough for her pup to find help. Jack straightened slightly, his determination solidifying. There was no way he was leaving him here. The little one hadn't given up. And now, neither could he. He reached for his radio, his voice firm, though his throat was tight. Dispatch, this is Deputy Carter. I've got an emergency. Injured animal, adult female Malinois, near Forest Edge Trail. Request immediate rescue assistance. Static crackled in response. His focus remained on the fragile pair before him, the loyal pup, the fading mother, and the bond that had carried them both through unthinkable odds. Jack kept one hand on the radio, the other resting gently on the mother dog's trembling side. The dispatcher's voice came through with static. "Rescue will be dispatched. Estimated arrival, 2 hours." His jaw clenched. 2 hours. She didn't have 2 hours. He glanced down at the frail Malinois, her chest heaving with each labored breath, then at the puppy pawing anxiously at her neck. Time was slipping away, and with it, 2 lives. If he waited, she would not survive. He shoved the radio back onto his belt. The branches pinning her down weren't impossibly heavy, but combined with her weakness, they were a death sentence. He stripped off his jacket, folding it into a makeshift cushion, and slid it carefully beneath her head. "Stay with me, girl, don't give up now," he whispered, his voice rough with urgency. The pup barked once, as if echoing his command. Jack drew in a deep breath and planted his hands firmly against the largest branch. Every muscle in his body strained as he pushed. The wood groaned, his arms trembled, sweat beading on his forehead. But he refused to quit. The dog whimpered softly, her eyes following his every move. Come on, Jack muttered through gritted teeth. With a final heave, the branch shifted, rolling just enough to free her chest. She gasped, a weak, rattling breath, but she was breathing a little easier. But Jack knew it wasn't enough. "I'm getting you out of here. Both of you." He slid his arms carefully beneath her frail body. She was lighter than she should have been, a shell of what a strong canine breed dog once was. She whimpered as he lifted but didn't resist. The puppy trotted at his boots, yipping frantically. Jack rose to his feet, adjusting her carefully in his arms. Every instinct screamed at him to hurry. The forest path stretched ahead, dark and uneven, but he didn't falter. "Hold on, girl, just a little longer," he whispered, his voice breaking. The pup ran just ahead, guiding him, its cries echoing through the silent woods. Together, they began the desperate race against time. The forest seemed endless as Jack pushed forward. The Malinois lay limp in his arms, her breath shallow. The puppy darted ahead and circled back, its tiny barks urging him on. Branches snagged his uniform, thorns scraped his arms, but Jack ignored the sting. His only focus was keeping her alive. His muscles screamed in protest, shoulders burning. Every few steps, he stumbled over roots hidden beneath the soil, but he never let her slip. Sweat trickled down his face. He clenched his teeth, his breath coming in harsh gasps. "Don't you give up," he whispered down at her. "I won't let you go. Not tonight." The path grew steeper, the forest floor slick with damp moss. Jack's boots slipped once, his knees buckling, and for a terrifying second, he almost dropped her. Panic shot through him. He tightened his grip, lowering himself to one knee to steady his breath. The mother dog whimpered faintly. She was still fighting, she hadn't given up, and neither could he. With a guttural sound, half grunt, half prayer, he pushed back to his feet, forcing his body forward through the pain. The forest finally began to thin. Moonlight spilled across the trail. He shifted her one last time in his arms, whispering hoarsely, "Almost there, girl, almost home," with the pup yipping urgently at his heels. Deputy Carter pressed onward, every ounce of strength poured into the promise he had silently made. The forest finally opened into a clearing, but Jack's relief was short-lived. In his arms, the Malinois' body grew heavier, her shallow breath slowing. He stumbled forward, dread pressing down on him. The puppy whined sharply, sensing the urgency. "Just hold on a little longer," Jack muttered, his voice breaking, but even as he spoke, he felt her frame twitch weakly. His heart lurched. He dropped to one knee in the clearing, laying her gently onto the grass. The pup immediately pressed against her, pawing frantically at her muzzle. She gave a faint whimper, her chest rising unevenly, her eyes fluttering. Doubt clawed its way into his chest. Was he too late? No, he growled, his training kicking in. He pressed his ear close to her muzzle. Faint, ragged breaths, weak, but still there. His pulse raced. She wasn't gone yet. He pulled his jacket tighter around her frail body. "Stay with me, girl," he whispered fiercely. "You fought this long, you're not giving up now." Gathering his strength, Jack scooped her back into his arms. His muscles screamed, but he forced himself upright. He fixed his eyes on the faint outline of his patrol car barely visible through the trees. Each step forward was a battle. Behind him, the forest seemed to close, swallowing the silence. Ahead of him, faint hope lingered. The Malinois let out one weak sigh, her body limp, but still alive. Jack burst from the tree line, his lungs burning. His patrol car stood just ahead, glinting under the pale moonlight. The puppy yipped wildly. He yanked open the back door and gently lowered her onto the seat. The pup scrambled in after her, refusing to let her out of sight. Jack slid into the driver's seat and flicked on the siren. The night air split with the wail as the engine roared to life. Gravel sprayed as the patrol car shot forward. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He risked quick glances into the rearview mirror. The puppy paced across the seat, crying softly, licking at its mother's face. She barely moved. Jack's heart thudded painfully. He pressed harder on the accelerator. "Stay with me," he muttered over and over. A memory flashed in his mind. Another partner. Another desperate race in the night. His first K9, Ace. A call gone wrong. A loss that had carved a hole in his life. Not again. He wouldn't let it happen again. City lights finally flickered in the distance. The vet hospital's glowing red sign appeared like a beacon. Jack swerved into the lot. Brakes screeching. Before the car had fully settled, he was out, scooping her into his arms again. The hospital door slid open, and staff rushed forward. "Critical," Jack barked, his voice raw. "She's not breathing right." Within seconds, they lifted her onto a gurney. The pup cried out as the mother disappeared into the bright hallway. Jack staggered after them, his chest heaving, praying silently that this race against time wasn't already lost. The waiting room felt unbearably still. Jack sank into a hard plastic chair, his chest still heaving. The puppy sat at his boots, its wide eyes fixed on the hallway. He rubbed a hand across his face, the weight of exhaustion pressing down. Every tick of the clock on the wall seemed to drill into his skull. Minutes dragged by like hours. Jack leaned forward, fingers trailing absently over the pup's soft fur. He swallowed hard, whispering, "She's strong. She'll pull through. She has to." His voice cracked. The memory of Ace returned. Sharp and painful. The frantic drive. The sterile room. The final, heartbreaking silence. That wound, buried for years, tore open now, raw and aching. He clenched his fists, refusing to believe this night would end the same way. The doors at the end of the hallway swung open. A man in a white coat emerged, his expression unreadable. Jack shot upright, his heart thudding. The vet remained silent, pulling off his gloves. Jack's breath caught. "Tell me," he demanded, his voice cracking under the strain. The vet finally looked at him, his gaze softening. "She's critical," he said carefully, "but you brought her in just in time." The words hit Jack like a rush of air. Relief surged through him so powerfully his knees almost buckled. He pressed a hand over his face, swallowing back a flood of emotions. The puppy yipped, tail wagging weakly. Jack crouched, scooping the pup into his hands, hugging it close. "You did it, little one," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You saved her." The vet crouched beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "She's not out of danger yet," he warned gently, "but she has a fighting chance because of you." Jack nodded, eyes glistening. He looked down at the puppy. "Because of us," he corrected softly, and in that quiet waiting room, he felt the truth settle deep in his heart. Sometimes the smallest voice could lead you out of the darkest woods. Days slipped by. Each morning and evening, Jack returned to the small recovery room where the Malinois lay. The puppy never left her side. At first, progress was slow. She could barely lift her head. Jack sat with her, his large hands resting gently on her frail frame, whispering encouragement. "That's it, girl, just one more bite." And somehow, little by little, she responded. By the end of the week, her eyes, once dull, began to brighten. She managed to lift herself into a sitting position. The puppy barked excitedly, tail wagging furiously. Jack felt his chest swell with relief and pride. One evening, he entered the room to find her standing unsteadily, the puppy bouncing around her paws. She wobbled, but she stood. He froze, overwhelmed. Then with a soft laugh, he crouched down and opened his arms. The mother dog hobbled forward, pressing her head into his chest while the puppy yipped happily at his side. Jack held them both, his throat tight with emotion. They were becoming a family. By the second week, the German Shepherd grew steadier each day. The puppy, once frantic, now bounded happily around her. Watching them, Jack felt something stir inside him. He couldn't let them go. They weren't strays anymore, they were his. The paperwork was surprisingly simple. When the vet asked if he wanted to begin the adoption process, Jack didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said firmly. The day finally came when he led them out of the hospital. The mother walked slowly but proudly beside him, her pup bouncing ahead. The evening sun painted the sky in gold. Jack glanced down at them, a rare, unguarded smile on his face. "Let's go home," he whispered, as the puppy barked and the mother leaned against his leg. He knew the bond was sealed. The first night at home was quiet. Jack sat on his couch, the room dimly lit. The Malinois rested at his feet, curled protectively around her sleeping pup. For the first time in weeks, the constant worry was gone. In its place, memories of the night in the woods came rushing back. The desperate cries, the weight of her limp body. He realized just how close he had come to losing them. How easily the story could have ended in heartbreak. Just like before. His hands shook. For years, he had built walls around himself after losing Ace. Walls meant to keep pain out. But tonight, those walls finally cracked. Tears blurred his vision. He bent down, resting a hand gently on the mother's head. She lifted her eyes, soft and knowing, and pressed her muzzle into his palm. That simple gesture undid him completely. His voice broke as he whispered, "You saved me, too." The pup stirred, climbing clumsily onto his lap, its small tongue brushing against his cheek. Jack laughed through his tears, clutching the pup to his chest while the mother leaned closer, her steady gaze holding his fractured heart together. The little puppy hadn't just rescued its mother. It had rescued him. It had reminded him that love, loyalty, and family could be found even in the darkest nights. He wiped his face, pulling the two closer. "We're in this together now," he murmured, as the room filled with the quiet rhythm of their breaths. Jack felt whole in a way he hadn't in years. The days that followed were filled with a new rhythm. Morning patrols were followed by playful barks. The emptiness that had once haunted his home was replaced by warmth. His neighbors soon noticed the change, seeing the once solitary officer now moving with two loyal companions. One evening, as Jack sat on his porch watching the sunset, the puppy curled in his lap while the mother lay beside his chair. He found himself whispering, "Sometimes the smallest cries lead us to the biggest miracles." What began as a desperate chase through the woods had become a journey that mended three hearts. Hers, the pup's, and his own. Their story became a reminder that loyalty has no language, that love appears in the most unexpected forms, and that even the weakest voices can call us towards something greater. Jack had gone into the night as a weary officer, but he emerged with a family, forever changed.